Can you feel the upcoming crisis?
If you follow the discourse about the crisis in the media, it feels like a forthcoming natural disaster. What do you do when a tsunami is approaching? Run.
You decided to initiate a conversation on crisis. Europeans talk to Argentinians in order to find out what might be ahead of them. Is that what After the Crisis is about?
Yes.
Who exactly did you talk to in Argentina?
We didn't want to ask people who were especially involved in the events of 2001. Just people who are as near to us as possible, friends and friends of friends.
And are these people mostly artists from Buenos Aires?
Yes.
I associate the crisis with a wild beast. Do you think it is important to tame the beast a bit in our minds by getting pieces of advice from Argentinians?
Yes, after having talked so much about state bankruptcy with our Argentinian friends, we feel having gained first-hand knowledge about how to deal with it, practically and emotionally.
But when did you visit Argentina for the first time, and how was the atmosphere then?
When we were visiting Buenos Aires for the first time in 2003, there was an incredible creative and animated atmosphere. No one had any money in the art scene, but people were just doing things together in a light and joyful spirit.
So, what happens to paradise birds when a tsunami hits or when they face the so-called beast?
Strangely enough, many of the people we talked to said that the time of the crisis was the best time of their lives. Struggling seems fun when you succeed. Maybe we just didn't meet the victims. They might not be part of the art scene anymore.
What other changes did the crisis bring in the field of art that you noticed?
Artists had to use the materials they could afford. We couldn't find much video art after the crisis in Buenos Aires. It was very difficult to find imported products like videotapes.
So the question might be now, what does it mean to become a victim of crisis, and what does it mean not to become a victim of crisis?
Everyone will have a bite of the shit sandwich.
Did the Argentinians change their lifestyle very much after the crisis? Did they still buy brand name clothes or other brand name things?
Argentina is, in a way, already copyright free. Everybody uses cracked software. Since long, there are almost no record stores in Buenos Aires. All the music is downloaded. Fashion designers from Buenos Aires got careers, maybe also because imported brands were too expensive. We bought Argentinian designer clothes for the price of H&M.
Argentina is a good-looking and sexy society. People have their style. It hasn't a lot to do with being well off, or does it?
If you look at a person from the outside, he or she might be sexy irrespective of social status. In the moment contact gets more personal, all the social confidence like education, wealth, status, etc. come into effect. It turns out being well off is sexy. During our project, we were not so much interested about this part of being sexy, more in the look of love which adds some credibility to spoken words.
Western society loves comfort, forgetting a bit that it is love that comforts. Do you think that Argentina is a balanced society now in terms of material and non-material?
Beautiful word game. It's a question we would have loved to ask during the interviews.
Things you said earlier about optimism and joyful spirit of Argentinians show that understanding of unofficial, or let's call it biographic phases of crisis should never be detached from collective approach.
People underestimate their own role. Society consists of individuals like you and me. There's always a talk about politicians, the bankers, the corrupt people, the others. But if I look at me, or people I know, for example, in the art world, we like to work with people because they are our friends. Artists and curators build groups and invite each other to participate in shows. It's basically corrupt.
I have a feeling that a big part of society, especially in Poland, still believes in a beautiful American dream, even though we are about to face the collapse of the system and a serious hangover.
I don't know if it's beautiful. The American dream never appealed to me. It's very much related towards money. But the things I'm dreaming of are all for free. During state bankruptcy, you had to pay for the materialistic dreams of others. We learned from our Argentinian friends that being political just means being realistic about your own participation in society.
After the crisis, Argentinians talk about the moment of collapse and straight after, yes?
We tried to bring our interview partners back in time to the day when the banks closed and the protests started. It was a way to make them revive their state of being, since most of them were not reflecting upon it anymore. 10 years had already passed.
Dreams can be beautiful because they make you feel as if there are no boundaries. Don't you think that crisis is about learning boundaries and in this way becoming realistic? So in a way, you can understand crisis as a reconnecting with reality?
You might have an accident, a disease, become poor or lose sanity. Society created institutions and services to support you in some ways. If the whole of society has an incident, becomes poor or is losing sanity, the social net disappears. In a way, the world you know disappears and you're forced to connect with a new social reality.
Were people keen on talking about the experiences? Did they want to come back on the events of 2001?
I don't think they were all keen to talk about 2001.
You mentioned earlier about being realistic about your own participation in society. What did you mean?
To understand that you as a person will be victimized by political developments eventually, and that you can join with others to actively change political decisions as well. Some of our interview partners experience both ways.
Is it possible to feel somehow safe during crisis?
I imagine crisis to be a big stress. If you can cope with it or suppress your fear, it makes you act a lot, which makes you feel very safe indeed.
A few adjectives that could describe the stereotype of a Western person: successful, individualistic, fit, connected, security-centered, comfort-loving, rational. Which of the features, in your opinion, does the crisis hit first, thinking of the Argentinian experience?
Many of our friends organize themselves in artist collectives, so individualistic might be the first to go.
Don't you think that we need a redefinition of what's collective? Do you think that the approach of Argentinians toward what's collective changed or evolved?
I don't know if the approach changed. Building a collective means to build a micro-society, like a gang. You don't have to kill someone to become the member of an artist collective, but certainly you have to be the subordinate underneath an unwritten code. There's no institutional way to claim your rights in a case of conflicts within an artist collective.
What are the biggest differences between European and Argentinian society?
The biggest difference is that they have summer when we have winter.
Did you have any worries concerning your work in Argentina?
Yeah, that one of us falls in love with an interviewee.